Hey all, welcome back to the channel. Here with another World War III video for you. This time, a guide. It's one towards the anti-tank. Lots of people have been asking me about anti-tank stuff, and I know a lot of people don't really seem to know how to fight anti-tank. Or, well, tanks. So, gonna get quickly into this one, get as much information across to you as possible. Do remember though, to like, subscribe, comment, all that sort of shit, if you do enjoy the video. If not, comment why down below. I do read them, so let's get into it. So we're going to start off by looking at the dedicated AT weaponry, although these obviously can be used on all vehicles. And the stuff you see here isn't obviously the only stuff that's effective against vehicles. There is other stuff as well, and I will mention that towards the end of this little section. So obviously, as you can see, your dedicated AT weaponry, stuff that's like loadout based that you actually bring on your person. Obviously, RPG. Just watch out for the drop on it, really. Make sure you lead correctly. It's your standard AT weapon in most games. I'm sure everyone is familiar with it. As you can see, it is 6 weight. You can bring another 6 weight weapon with it as long as you do not bring any armor on you. You can bring 2 RPGs if you really wanted. Though I don't advise it. Some people get pissed off when they fight people with 2 RPGs. If you haven't, check out the Rocket Propel Gains video. Yeah, I got some not nice things put in chat for that one. Anyhow, so yeah, alongside obviously the RPG, which is kind of your ranged tool here, you also get anti-tank mines, C4 IED charges, and anti-tank grenades. Obviously, these all go in your secondary gadget slot, aka your grenade slot. And kind of, obviously, these act in different ways. Now, the anti-tank mines, obviously, you place on the floor. You need to make sure you don't place them too close together with one another. If you do this, they have a chance of setting the other one off without dealing full damage to the enemy vehicle. So you have to be a bit careful there. The anti-tank mines also at times will glint to enemy vehicles and stuff, obviously showing that they're there on the floor. Meaning they can shoot them and destroy them if they're not in too much of a sticky situation. But sometimes they will not see them, they will just drive straight over them. Next, the C4 IED. Now these obviously you carry around in your hand and you throw them out. You get 3 of these C4 IED charges, and depending on the vehicle, 2 or 3 will kill it if it's full health. So they can be used to take down a full vehicle. You can leave these like on the floor and detonate them yourselves, rather than hoping an anti-tank mine will obviously go off due to a vehicle. Though obviously that is a bit of a riskier maneuver. You need to keep line of sight on your IED in that case. But they are still pretty good. And then finally, you have the anti-tank grenades. These have a fairly short throw range and take longer than your standard grenades, ever so slightly, to throw. However, they are extremely useful. They deal, depending on the vehicle, up to like 1/3 of a vehicle's health in one grenade. You get 3 of these and you're able to take down a vehicle, obviously, in all 3. Depending on the vehicle, maybe you'll need an RPG as well to hit it. But you can mix it up. And I mean, most of the time you're not going to be the only person fighting a vehicle. So you should be good. And then next for the loadout, you also have the repair tool. Yes, I did screen grab that from in-game. Do not sleep on that thing. Oh boy. It is not just for repairing your vehicle. You can deconstruct enemy vehicles with it as well. Obviously, at the very end, they blow up and you will die if you're the one deconstructing it. So get it down to 1 HP, step back, throw any type of grenade under it. And yeah, kablooey. They do deal a lot of damage. Now, the stuff listed here is not the only stuff that can fight tanks within the loadout section. Pretty much all the secondary gadgets can do damage to vehicles. I don't believe the claymores go off to the vehicles passing them, though I haven't personally tried. If they do, I doubt they do much damage. Mentally, to me, that's not, a thing you would do. So I've Not tried it, not even for the purposes of this video. These are your main gadgets that will damage vehicles, and whilst the RGO impacts, the Semtex, and the frag grenades will also deal damage, they deal substantially less than these listed here. Now, onto strikes. Obviously, your strikes that will deal damage to tanks and are your main ones for destroying vehicles will be the JDAM, which is a bombing run. Narrow long has a delayed entry into the map, so it does take a few seconds. You've got to kind of be either trying to anticipate the movements of the vehicle or kind of hoping that a vehicle stays bogged down somewhere on an objective, or bomb an unsuspecting vehicle that is sat capturing an objective. Next is the anti-armor, smaller radius bombardment of artillery, obviously focused on destroying vehicles. These are extremely useful, and they are good, and they will kill infantry as well. Same with JDAM, so they are useful, but as you can see, they do cost a lot of points. And then finally, for the airstrike, you have the Stormbreaker here, which is the main one that I've chosen anyway, to put here because it's the one with the highest vehicle damage. It's just like the rest of the actual airstrikes. You just tablet, click, fly at it, and boom. Can deal about 70 damage to an Abrams, which is the heavy battle tank, which obviously leaves it open to 1 or 2 RPGs, depending on armor upgrades and all of that sort of shit. Can be really useful for turning the tide in a battle. The anti-armor will need a few hits to kill a vehicle, and the JDAM should be able to kill it in one, but might not, depending on how it cuts across the vehicle. And then finally, I've listed the loitering anti-armor munitions drone here. This is a little plane drone that you throw out. It's one of the aerial drones. And obviously, you fly it around and you crash it into it, and boom. Pretty useful. Deal about somewhere between 30 and 40 damage to a vehicle, usually, depending on its upgrades and what type of vehicle it is. Now, with all these listed here, obviously, I've not bothered listing IFVs, AFVs, tank destroyers, and tanks. They're all usable against all tanks. It's just how you have to play the fights differently depending on your armor. If you're going up against an Abrams in a Wolverine, it's going to be a tough fight. You would want to try and circle it or get a few hits and run, like do hit and run maneuvers, and hopefully have some friendly AT on the ground to actually assist you in fighting the tank. All bombing runs, all artillery, all airstrikes, except smoke, I think, will damage vehicles. Regardless of whether they say they're meant for infantry or not, even the napalm bombing run will damage and can kill vehicles. I've got numerous vehicle kills with napalm, just depends kind of how injured they are and that sort of stuff. The smoke, not sure, it might deal slight damage to vehicles because it is still artillery shells landing, although they don't have a HE payload or whatever, they have a smoke payload. You can die to smoke artillery landing if you're on foot. You just got to be careful it doesn't actually hit you, because yeah, it can kill you. So yeah, and then in the backpack, you can also get thermite grenades as your backup gadget, and you can get M203 grenade launcher for your underbarrel. Both of these can deal damage to vehicles. The thermite obviously ticks off its thermite, and depending if the vehicle's empty or not, so say it's an enemy spawn vehicle and you don't want to sit on it destroying it with the repair tool, you could throw a thermite grenade on it and it will tick it down and potentially even kill it. And then the M203, it's got a shit explosive radius at the moment, at the time of making this video. So it's a bit rough using it against infantry. To vehicles, it only does... Any armoured vehicle, it tends to only do about 8 damage to, at most. So it's not really worth using, but if it's on the tiniest smidgen of health and you're out of everything else, it could be a good backup. So yeah, everything else is usable. I haven't included the helicopter drone here. The helicopter drone could be super useful if you've got the right upgrades on it for fighting vehicles, especially as quite a lot of the vehicles don't have the ability to aim high enough if you're kind of going over the top of them and stuff. But do watch out for the tank AA conversions. T-72 and the Leo both have one, and it can ruin your day. Just going to show you a few clips of different things being used, such as the thermite, AT mines, all of that sort of shit. This road next to us.
Yep.
There you go, hit my mine. Got it.
Jamming him.
Enemy radar being jammed.
Yeah, it did.
Don't think it's seen mine though.
Online over the
No, it
air.
has.
That reversed into my second mine.
I missed.
Objective Charlie 2 is under attack.
Fuck, so did I. I was in a shit spot for it. Got it.
Nice. Four vehicles just killed all your mine, I think.
Yep, it did.
Take
Okay.
beat. I hit him with a rocket. Spawned and tried to get out to get a rocket onto the Textron.
There you go. So there's examples of stuff in action. How you choose to play with them is kind of your call. In a few of these clips, I played very Sapper-esque. I laid the AT mines as traps and stayed near them, watching them. Under the impression that a tank would probably only hit one, not two of them, and would try to retreat to base. Therefore, I would get ready and kill it with an RPG. But you can play it differently. You can put them in choke points to objectives and stuff like that. They might get injured on the way in, and you'll contribute to an enemy vehicle getting taken out of the match. Currently, the points you get for destroying vehicles is a bit shit. If you're not the one that kills it but deals a lot of damage, the person who kills it tends to get more points than you. Even if they only deal 10 points of damage to the vehicle, they will sometimes get around 300 to 400 points for killing a vehicle, maybe more, depending on how many people are inside it. So this can be a bit shitty, but hopefully they will fix that soon. And at the end of the day, contributing to getting enemy vehicles off the map is extremely useful. So whilst it can hurt that you do not get as many points, it's good just to get it off the map. It can really change the tide of a battle. Next, let's have a look at Vehicle Active Protection Systems, or APS. So, the three types of APS currently in the game for vehicles is RCIED jammer, the radio jammer, and the AT-APS. Now, as you can see, you've got all the pros and cons here, so I'm going to run through kind of the pros and what they're good against, like pros and cons, what they're good against, one at a time. So you can see here the RCIED jammer, small little box. It's got a short radius, sits on top of the tank. The pros to this one is that it, in a small area, it will jam infantry, essentially. Blocks area scanning, enemy respawns, and disables strike call-ins. So yeah, essentially it will jam infantry that are close to the vehicle. It disables remote explosives and gadgets. That means that it blocks anti-tank mines from going off, and it blocks C4 IEDs from going off. It also jams the loitering drones and the quadcopters. If you fly them too close, you won't be able to control the vehicle or the drone that well. And even if you do manage to hit the vehicle, the munitions warhead on the front will not go off. And then finally, they also disrupt communications, HUD, and drone controls. So drone controls is the aerial drones I was just on about. But yeah, it stops kind of spawning and scrambles the enemy's HUDs. The cons to this little RCIED jammer, however, is that it doesn't destroy projectiles, it only stops them going off. So you might drive over it once and it'd be fine. Doesn't go off. The second time, however, you might drive over it, and as you drive over it, an enemy might shoot an RPG at you. This RPG could set that anti-tank mine off or that C4 off, dealing an immense amount of damage to you and possibly even taking you out in one hit from full health because of the combo. And then the other con is that it's got a smaller effective range compared to, say, the radio jammer one, but its uses are different, and it will protect obviously the immediate area of the vehicle itself. So, what's the RCID jammer good against? As just said, it's good against, obviously, it blocks AT mines and C4 from going off, as well as drones. This obviously can ruin your day if you set up a trap, or if you're trying to get a vehicle that's trying to reverse away into base and you can't get close enough to RPG it, or can't get around the building quick enough, or whatever. Means you can't use one of these loitering drones to chase it down and kill it before it gets back to base. How would you counter the RCID jammer? If you can see it, you could shoot it and destroy it. But alternatively, use pretty much anything else that's listed for or against, I guess, the other types of APS here. So obviously an RCID jammer doesn't stop RPGs, it doesn't stop airstrikes, doesn't stop artillery, doesn't stop bombing runs, obviously doesn't stop guided tank shells, doesn't stop the little anti-tank crows and stuff like that. Though it can fuck up Scarab's drivings as well if you get too close, but it's rare. So yeah, pretty much use anything listed for everything else. The RCID jammer basically will only screw up if you try and use AT mines or C4 or the drones. Otherwise, you can just bombard it from a distance with RPGs and airstrikes. Now, radio jammers. Radio jammers, obviously, it's got big antenna, so it'll be an additional antenna type thing on top of the tank if you're trying to identify it. So the pros for this one: prevents the vehicle you are in from being marked by enemies. So obviously stops enemies visually marking you, stops you coming up on UAVs and shit like that. You become undetectable by infrared and thermal cameras. This goes for all of them, whether that be RPGs and you've slapped the thermal on, the 4x thermal, or you put a thermal on out the backpack. It won't come up on those. It won't come up on vehicles. Infrared and thermal cameras. It won't come up on airstrikes, thermals, and stuff like that. This radio jammer also then disrupts the flight trajectory of incoming airstrikes. This is the things like the Stormbreaker, the Hellfire, the Mephisto. That is those three that it will screw up the flight path of if you're over the top of it. In addition to not actually being able to see the tank in like the thermally type view as you fly down, making it super hard and almost a waste if it does have a radio jammer calling one of these in. So the cons to this one, obviously, it doesn't protect from conventional AT weapons. So these are your RPGs, anti-tank mines, your C4, and it has a small protection range, but will stop above for the things like the airstrike. How would you counter this? Well, once again, you could destroy it if you're lucky enough, or you can use the stuff that the other APSs are good against. So if it's got a radio jammer, it can't stop AT mines and C4 from going off. It can't stop the little loitering drones from going off. Obviously, it doesn't stop RPGs, doesn't stop the guided tank shells, doesn't stop the anti-tank crows from hitting them. So you can fight against this one somewhat easily, as long as you don't rely on thermals or the guided airstrikes. Now, finally, the AT APS. This is a little rocket pod one on top. Quite easy to see. Looks a little bit like the AT tank, the anti-tank crows that can be on top, but it's got 6 tubes on it instead, and it will just rotate by itself. You'll notice it if you were to look at a tank. It's the easiest of the APS to identify. Now, the pros to this one, it automatically will neutralize rockets and guided missiles, not on about the airstrikes here, that come at it. So this is the 80 Crows turrets and the guided anti-armor shells that you can get for tanks and RPGs. That is the stuff it will target and destroy as they're incoming, unless you're really close and or like on a lower elevation shooting up, so it can't angle down properly. It can block up to 3 projectiles over 5 seconds, and it holds up to 3 charges. So it can be pretty good for saving your ass. Cons to this, however, it's got a long cooldown period of up to 15 seconds. See where it's got to sort itself out and fix itself up, essentially. You have no protection against airstrikes with this one, and you got no protection against kind of mines or standard vehicle weaponry like your standard turret, though none of the others do, but still. All of these pros and cons are taken straight from the in-game listing. So how would you counter this one? Like I say, it's the easiest one to see, it's the easiest one to destroy. However, use the stuff from the other category again. It can't stop AT mines, can't stop C4, doesn't stop the loitering drones. It will be seen on thermal. It can be hit by airstrikes, bombing runs, artillery quite easily. So yeah, it's not that hard to track down and kill. Hopefully with this knowledge, this will help you to fight some tanks. Now finally, we have vehicle armor. This might just help you identify and know why you're doing less damage, per se, to a vehicle than you might have hoped. So there are 3 types of armor upgrades for every vehicle. They are basically the same in design and kind of defense values. They just named different things for each vehicle, based on obviously its country of origin. So your 3 tiers are, the first one you unlock is medium, and it's just a good upgrade all around for your vehicle. Gives increased resistance to both AT weaponry and tank weaponry. You get both a separate slot on MBTs anyhow for the actual armor and the turret armor. IFVs you do not get a turret armor for. The second one you unlock is a light armor. Now this one is it's effective against RPGs. It's an RPG net essentially for most vehicles in some sort of manner. Doesn't quite work as it does in real life, obviously coding restrictions and whatnot, but it definitely stops and reduces RPG damage when you hit the vehicle. Though on things like IFVs and stuff, you still have the weaker point of the turret if you can hit it, that you still deal base damage to rather than reduced with an RPG. Finally, you then also have the heavy armor for them, and basically this armor it's meant for against tanks, though it does also give increased resistance against infantry weaponry. This obviously is useful and will help you essentially with staying alive in pretty much all situations. So visually here you can obviously see a default example of a T-72 and a default example of an Ajax. And then down below you can see them with armor upgrades. The T-72 has both a heavy turret and heavy side armor, and the Ajax has a RPG net on it. Just so you can visually see a bit of difference there. The turret on the T-72 is obviously visually different. It's got more angular armor to it rather than rounded. And then the side has extra armor plating going further down to cover the tracks more as well. Good thing to note with this, with armor, with APS, with everything to do with vehicles. If you can identify as much stuff as possible on a vehicle from distance, then you will be able to rule out what it might or might not have on it. So if you see a T-72 with this side armor, one of its slots is gone. All vehicles only get 3 slots for upgrades. If you see it with side armor, only gets 1. That's 1 slot taken up. If you see like this T-72 example, the 40 mic grenade launcher on top, that's another slot taken up. And then if you see the turret upgraded armor like that, that's its 3rd and final one taken up. Therefore, meaning it physically cannot have APS. Means it cannot have thermals. So it's a good way to identify and be able to do different things. This Ajax, for example, RPG net on the sides, has a 7.62 crows on top. Then it's a bit hard to identify what the 3rd and final upgrade is here. It cannot have turret armor. So that leaves 1 slot open. Could be APS, could be thermals. You don't know, but at least you can rule out 2 sections of it and keep your head on a swivel for the 3rd. And there you have it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this anti-tank guide, and I hope that it's going to be of some use to you. If there's anything I've forgotten, please do leave a comment down below. If there's anything you think might be wrong or misinformation, that sort of shit, please do let me know as well. Thank you all for getting this far. Please do like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever. Sharing goes a long way, especially if you know people that need to know this shit. And it helps the channel grow. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you all. And I'll see you in the next one.